Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about something that most men completely misunderstand. Why some women become emotionally fixated on a man who was never even their type in the first place. Because here's the reality no one tells you. Attraction is rarely logical. A woman might think she prefers a certain look, a certain lifestyle, or a certain personality, but then find herself constantly thinking about a man who doesn't fit any of those boxes. And it's not random. It's psychological. Obsession isn't built on surface-level preferences. It's built on emotional engagement that she didn't expect to feel. Most men believe that if they aren't her physical type, they're already at a disadvantage. But what they fail to understand is that emotional intrigue can override visual preference very quickly. When a man triggers curiosity, safety, tension, and unpredictability in the right balance, attraction stops being about logic and starts becoming about experience. And once attraction becomes emotional instead of visual, attachment starts forming fast. So in this video, we're breaking down the psychology behind why some men become unforgettable, even to women who initially overlooked them, and how emotional stability, presence, and masculine framing can create a pull that's hard for her to ignore. Number 1, unpredictable confidence creates curiosity. Confidence by itself is not rare. Most men try to appear confident when they want to impress a woman. They speak louder, exaggerate their personality, or try to dominate attention through humor or status displays. But this type of performative confidence is predictable, and predictability kills intrigue. When a man behaves in ways that feel rehearsed or approval-seeking, it signals that he's trying to manage perception rather than simply existing within his own frame. Unpredictable confidence works differently. It shows up when a man remains grounded in himself while allowing natural variation in his energy. One moment he's focused and serious, discussing his ambitions or values. The next, he's relaxed and playful, responding with humor or spontaneity without losing composure. These shifts create psychological tension because she can't fully anticipate how he'll respond, but she still feels emotionally safe in his presence. That tension is what creates curiosity, and curiosity keeps her mentally engaged even when you're not around. When she's unsure how you'll react, but confident that your reactions will remain emotionally controlled, she starts analyzing interactions more deeply. And the more mental energy she invests in understanding you, the stronger her emotional engagement becomes over time. The second thing is emotional energy is registered before words. Before she consciously processes what you say, she's already reading your emotional state. Women are highly responsive to tone, posture, pace of speech, and behavioral consistency. If your energy feels anxious, approval-seeking, or overly invested too early, it communicates emotional dependence, even if your words are confident. And emotional dependence reduces perceived value because it suggests your stability is influenced by her responses. But when your energy remains calm, measured, and internally regulated, she interprets that as strength, not aggression, but control. Emotional self-control signals that your mood isn't dictated by external validation, and that level of stability makes interaction feel safe because it removes the pressure of having to constantly reassure you. Over time, she begins associating your presence with emotional ease. Conversations feel balanced instead of demanding. Interaction feels engaging instead of performative. And that sense of emotional consistency becomes something she seeks out repeatedly, which is how attraction transitions into attachment. What most men don't understand is that emotional energy creates anticipation. When your presence feels steady and controlled, she relaxes. but she also becomes more aware of you. There's no chaos to defend against, no instability to manage. That calm strength stands out in a world where most interactions are emotionally noisy. And when she experiences that contrast, she starts associating you with psychological clarity. You become the man who doesn't flinch, doesn't rush, and doesn't react impulsively. And here's where it deepens. Emotional regulation creates trust before commitment ever does. If you can handle silence without filling it nervously, handle tension without over-explaining, and handle uncertainty without seeking reassurance, she begins to view you as emotionally capable of leading, not controlling, leading. And women are naturally drawn to men whose internal state feels solid, because when your energy is stable, she doesn't have to manage you. She can simply experience you, and that freedom is what makes her lean in. Thirdly, challenge forces. Emotional investment. Comfort is easy to enjoy, but it doesn't create fixation. When a man becomes overly agreeable in an attempt to maintain approval, he removes tension from the interaction. He avoids disagreement, suppresses his own preferences, and prioritizes her comfort over authenticity. While this might seem polite on the surface, it communicates that his boundaries are flexible and dependent on maintaining acceptance. A man who challenges respectfully introduces a different dynamic. He expresses independent opinions, maintains standards for behavior, and doesn't immediately adapt his views to align with hers. This creates friction, not hostility, but engagement. She becomes aware that approval from him isn't automatic, and once approval becomes conditional, emotional investment increases. She begins paying closer attention to interactions, noticing what earns positive responses and what doesn't. That shift transforms passive attraction into active involvement, because she now feels the need to participate in maintaining your interest. When you challenge with composure instead of ego, you create polarity. You're not arguing to win. You're standing firm because you have an identity that doesn't bend under social pressure. That signals self-respect. And self-respect is magnetic because it shows you value your standards more than temporary approval. Women are instinctively drawn to men who are anchored in themselves. It tells her you won't lose your frame just because she disagrees, tests you, or pushes back. Challenge also introduces emotional stakes. If she senses that your attention isn't guaranteed, that your interest must be met with effort and alignment, she becomes more present. She listens more carefully. She engages more intentionally. She invests more strategically. Because people value what isn't freely handed to them. When your time, energy, and approval are earned rather than given automatically, attraction shifts from casual interest to focused attention. And focused attention is where obsession begins. Obsession. Number 4. Her signals increase when your stability does. Interest rarely begins with grand gestures. Instead, it develops through subtle behavioral changes, increased responsiveness, extended conversations, small attempts to maintain proximity, or curiosity about your routine and preferences. These signals often appear inconsistently at first, especially when emotional risk is present. What determines whether they grow or disappear is your reaction. If you interpret slight increases in engagement as an invitation to chase harder or escalate emotionally, you introduce pressure. Pressure creates uncertainty about your stability, which reduces her willingness to invest further. But when you acknowledge engagement calmly, without over-committing attention or becoming reactive, you reinforce emotional safety. Safety encourages continued involvement, and involvement gradually builds attachment. When your stability remains consistent, her signals naturally become clearer. She'll start initiating more often, asking deeper questions, and subtly increasing emotional exposure. Not because you forced it, but because your behavior reduced uncertainty. Stability lowers defense mechanisms. And when defense mechanisms lower, curiosity turns into pursuit. She becomes more comfortable revealing interest because she doesn't fear emotional volatility on your end. But if your reactions fluctuate based on her level of attention, warm when she's engaged, cold when she's distant, you create instability. And instability forces her to protect herself instead of investing further. A grounded man doesn't overcorrect based on minor behavioral shifts. He remains centered regardless of temporary fluctuations. And that consistency signals long-term emotional reliability, which is what allows subtle signals to evolve into sustained attachment over time. Number 5, recognition builds attachment without dependency. Compliments are common. Recognition is rare. Compliments focus on appearance or performance. Recognition focuses on emotional nuance, noticing effort, mood shifts, or subtle behavioral changes without drawing unnecessary attention to them. When a man demonstrates awareness of her internal state without attempting to fix it or seek validation in return, it communicates understanding. Understanding builds trust because she feels psychologically acknowledged rather than evaluated. Maintaining your own boundaries while doing this is critical. Awareness should never turn into overinvestment. When she feels seen but not responsible for your emotional state, interaction becomes engaging rather than draining, which encourages deeper attachment. Recognition also signals emotional intelligence without emotional dependence. When you notice the effort she puts into something, the way her energy shifts during a conversation, or the subtle confidence she displays in certain moments, and you acknowledge it calmly, it shows you're paying attention without chasing validation. That kind of awareness feels intentional. It tells her you're observant, not desperate. And observant men stand out because they respond to what's real, not just what's visible. But here's the key. You recognize without rewarding everything. You don't overpraise. You don't overreact. You don't inflate small gestures into dramatic moments. You stay measured. That balance keeps your frame intact. When she feels understood but not pedestalized, attachment grows naturally. Because now she feels valued, not worshipped. And value, when paired with masculine composure, creates the kind of emotional gravity that pulls her closer without you having to chase. Final truth. Presence outranks performance. Every time. Performance can be copied, presence cannot. Any man can rehearse lines, study techniques, or imitate confident behavior for a few minutes. But presence isn't a tactic. It's a state. A man who is physically composed, emotionally regulated, and mentally sharp communicates value without announcing it. His eye contact is steady without being forced. His tone is controlled without being stiff. His reactions are proportional, never exaggerated, never needy. Those nonverbal cues signal reliability. And reliability reduces emotional risk. When a woman senses that your emotional state doesn't swing based on her approval, she relaxes. She doesn't feel pressure to manage you. She doesn't feel responsible for keeping you stable. And that freedom creates attraction because emotional steadiness feels powerful. When your presence consistently communicates calm authority and internal direction, she associates you with psychological stability, and people naturally gravitate toward environments that regulate their emotions. If being around you feels grounding instead of chaotic, she will want to return to that feeling repeatedly. Repetition builds attachment. Attachment builds obsession. Here's what most men miss. Presence creates emotional imprint. She may forget specific words you said, but she will remember how she felt in your space. Did she feel calm, slightly challenged, curious, safe? That emotional memory is what replays later when she's alone. And when emotional memory replays, you stay on her mind without effort. So stop performing. Stop trying to out-talk, out-text, or out-impress other men. Build internal control instead. Control your reactions. Control your pace. Control your emotional responses. Because when your presence is solid, you don't chase attention. You command it. And when a woman consistently feels regulated and intrigued around you, obsession becomes a byproduct of who you are, not something you forced. Attraction doesn't always begin with preference. It often begins with experience. The experience of interacting with someone who remains stable under pressure, challenges without hostility, notices without overinvesting, and engages without seeking validation. That combination creates curiosity. Curiosity builds mental engagement, and mental engagement, sustained over time, becomes attachment. So next time you assume you're not her type, ask yourself whether you're offering emotional predictability or psychological intrigue. Because one gets ignored and the other gets remembered. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading.